You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast. Hey, glad to have you on board. I hope your week has gone well. We are finally seeing some elements of spring here up in the great state of Montana, so we're kind of excited about that, and we got a fair amount of moisture, so that's looking good for this coming summer. We are a water-stressed state. So on a personal front, I have been doing a lot of traveling lately, so I was involved in doing some training with some people so they can get their pesticide license, of course, and then also I did a speaking engagement on wildlife damage inspection in another country, believe it or not. So that was a huge honor to experience. So a lot of traveling just for a 1 hour talk, but that's just the way it is sometimes. So if you're new to the show, if you're wondering what we're all about, we provide all things related to wildlife damage management on a technical basis. So we really kind of get down to the nitty-gritty and deal with some topics that your average wildlife control podcast won't deal with. Why? Because it requires research. A lot of wild pest podcasts deal with the mechanics of doing things in the field, and that is important. This isn't bashing those shows. There's certainly a lot to that. But where they get weak in is that there's a lot of questions when you start getting deeper into the business that cannot be simply gleaned from everyday, ordinary business experience. You can do a lot. It brings you probably 80% of the way, but it's that last 20%, that 20-80 principle that you might have heard about, is much more difficult to delve into, but those are important because often those are things that can get you into trouble, or that 20% can give you a competitive advantage over your competition. So that's what we delve in here, because we're trying to push the industry to become more technically precise, and there's a lot of things in our industry that we simply don't know. And so we have to kind of make a best guess at it. But so that's part of where this podcast is all about. So if you're interested in some of those topics, then certainly, hopefully you'll ring the bell and subscribe to the channel. We do deal with other things, as well as, in terms of some of those nitty-gritty, hands-on types things. We do delve in that, but that is not the ultimate focus of the show. So if you're wanting a podcast that delves into how to set a trap, this probably isn't the podcast for you. But if you're interested in understanding histoplasmosis and how to protect yourself from it, and what we know and what we don't know, how do you clean up guano in a way that, what are some of the things you need to consider, then this is probably a show for you. Well, anyways, we're glad to have you on board. If you're interested in commenting on the show, we'd love to hear that. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future shows, we love hearing from the audience, giving us ideas. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk about what I am interested in. Other items to consider, if you have criticisms, we'd love to hear that as well. We're always looking to try to improve the content of the show, and we want to make sure we're putting out accurate, fair information. And then always we're looking for guests on our show. We think that there's a lot of people out there who have products, services, and items who would need a wider audience to serve the wildlife control community, because we are a niche community, and I believe we're underserved. So if you have something that you think want to try to reach out to this audience, we'd love to hear from you. Definitely reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. All right, well, enough of that sort of introductory work. What are we going to talk about today? Oh, one more thing. Do want to just simply point out my website, wildlifecontrolconsultant.com, if you're looking for books, training materials. If you're interested in hiring me to perhaps work on your PowerPoint, we know we're getting some of you are looking at probably doing some training. You've been asked to do some training for next fall after the busy season is over and during the training season. Definitely you might want to reach out to me to try to help improve your PowerPoints, or definitely even to lay them out for you to save you some time in that particular area. Also available for ghostwriting and for research of different topics. You can definitely reach out to me again at wildlifecontrolconsultant.com. All right. What do I want to talk about this week? Well, as spring is coming, bats are going to be back in the picture again. Of course, as many of you know, they've been suffering terribly. Many bat species have been suffering from white nose syndrome. For example, little brown bats have suffered, I think, 95% losses in some parts of this country. Other bats have suffered significantly as well. So it's a serious disease. But many of you are still encountering bats in structures, and where customers need to have bat management services for their buildings. And perhaps you're looking for training, or perhaps you've been doing it for a while and you're just looking to up your understanding of bat biology and some bat issues, particularly when it comes to things like white nose syndrome and bat behavior, and you're looking to sort of look at things from a different perspective. And this is sort of one of the things that I think is underutilized by many wildlife control operators. Sometimes our industry has a little bit of an anti-intellectual bent. One of the reasons why you want to get training from other people, even you may be a bona fide expert in something, is that sometimes a person is able to help you see the topic from a different perspective, or emphasizes a different piece of content that you didn't know before or you weren't fully aware of. And so you always want to be gaining new information and gaining new insights. Even when you may disagree with the speaker, you sometimes are able to reflect back on your own understanding of the content. But in this case, you may also be interested in how do you train your employees in some bat control to save you some time so that you can be out doing something else that's a higher value for you. So you want to kind of give them a foundation. Well, I had an opportunity to speak with a person who was involved in developing this particular training. Let me see if I can pull her name up here. Let's see. Her name was Susan Honid. I hope I pronounced that correct. The spelling here is not quite what I really needed it to be. But Susan she is a professor at a school, and she was involved in creating this particular training program that I recently had the opportunity to go through. Presently, this training is still free. So if you're interested in taking this, it is still free at this time. And I'm recording this on March 7th, 2025. It is unclear whether it will continue to be free in the future. So if you're interested in this, it is open for you to use. Of course, it's completely web-based, and it has a lot of information that I found helpful for me as an educator to listen to someone who really specializes in bat biology and understanding bats from a much more biological and academic perspective than even I have. It's because I'm not a biologist, so this is an individual who really could step it up to another level. So I'm endorsing this particular training. Not that I agree with every single jot and tittle. I think sometimes in America, people think when you endorse something, it means you endorse 100%. No, what I'm saying is that this particular training can be worth your time, even in situations where it can challenge you, right? So are there things that I disagree with? Yes. However, I do think I benefited from the training, and they also are looking for people to comment on the training. So at the end of the training event, they do have a survey that they want you to fill out in order to get the completion certificate. And I would encourage people, if you are willing to go through this particular training, and it is free, do the courtesy to them to give them honest, forthright, and constructive feedback. And what I mean by that is that if you're criticizing something, be specific. Don't just yell at them, this is stupid, this is dumb. That does not help anyone, and it can be rather mean. What you're looking to do, if you have a negative comment, say what is wrong. Specifically, I was taking notes on elements of the training so that I could comment later on. So I could actually say it was lesson 4, section 2 had this. And I could actually point it. Sometimes I even gave the minute area of the videos. So that is something that's constructive for them. So it's not just simply someone yelling at them and saying, hey, they don't like something. I found the training to be really worthwhile. So what is it? How do you get to it? Well, you get to it because it's called training.canadabats.org. Let me repeat that again for you. So it's training.canadabats.org. And this will be the home page that you're coming to. And it says, Bat Friendly Canada training program for managing bats in buildings. Now, Canada has a lot more restrictions about bats, particularly when it comes to what we would call their federal lands or their national lands, their crown lands. And so there are certain things that have to be maintained. They don't have as many bats in Canada as we have in the U.S., so clearly those of you in more southerly areas may not find a lot of the information as valuable. But for those of you in the United States that are on the northern half of the country, I would think that you would definitively benefit. And of course, the closer you are to the Canadian border, the benefit. But there's a lot of information that talks about some of the biology of bats, what they do, like temperatures that they can tolerate, where they're hearing, what they can hear, how the echolocation sort of works, and as well as information about how to protect against some white nose syndrome, and some comments about how one-way doors need to be constructed. And so let me give an illustration of that. So typically they're kind of fans of the tube and cloth plastic. And so a lot of us in the industry are familiar with the bat cone, which is sort of a cylindrical plastic cone that you would insert over the bat exit. Up in Canada, they like to emphasize, at least with this training, they like to emphasize sort of a PVC pipe with a plastic ring at the end where it has plastic sheeting that would hang down from the end. The reason they like plastic rather than cloth is they don't want the bat to hang up in it with their claws, right? So where their thumbs are, right? So that those often have a claw there, and they don't want it hung up, so they use plastic sheeting. And the reason is because that will hang down from the tube. Maybe I can even find an illustration of that here. Let's go bat tube with cloth. Let's see here if I can find one of those in the images. Here we go. Yeah, so let me pull this up for you here just so that you can see it. I don't know why my internet is so slow today, but it is not fast. So this is what they like to emphasize here is this PVC pipe. Maybe I can blow it up a little bit more for those of you to see it. And then they have, sort of a clear plastic sleeve that has some flexibility to it that would then hang over. Now this one's facing almost up and down, but you kind of get the idea. Where for most professionals, they just simply use the tube. So I'm not sure why, right? Those of you that have a lot more bat experience than I do, I'd be intrigued as to why this is their deal. They also talk about other things about the importance. It's like, for example, nitrile gloves as opposed to latex gloves. And the reason they tout nitrile gloves is because they found that they believe that bats are less likely to get hung up in the glove. So when they like grab you with their hooks, that it's less likely probably to penetrate them to get entrapped. And so they believe that people should use nitrile gloves rather than latex gloves. So again, it's these little tweaks that they're suggesting. So if you have experience with bats, you'll get these little tweaks that can be quite helpful, because remember, the more you know, the harder it is to learn something new. And so you're really learning things at the margins, right? At that 5%, maybe 10% level. And so this is what I found interesting about this program. So let me kind of outline what the whole program is about. So you have basically 11 modules, and each module will have anywhere from 2 to, I think, 7 submodules. So it'll be, like section 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, and then it'll go section 2-1-2. And it covers things such as bat biology, legal issues, disease, exclusion methods, bat handling methods, how to even hold a bat. I really liked the chapter, the section on how to handle a bat. For example, they don't like it when people pull a bat out and stretch its wings. That is very stressful for a bat. And I think we intuitively knew that, but some people do it because they like that impressive photo, the bat's kind of out there. But they're saying that's very stressful for the bat, and it can also harm and cause injury to the bat. It explained how to tell the difference between a juvenile bat and an adult bat. I'll let you. So some of these things that we just don't learn in the typical bat exclusion class, for example. So some of the handling information was the importance of how to grasp the bat without stressing it. And then if you needed to extend a wing, because that's one of the things you have to do in order to measure the forearm, for example, if you're trying to determine what species it is. That can be, they'll tell you how to do that properly. You're doing it one wing at a time. The importance of not bending the wings back behind like hyperextending the bat backwards. These are important things for being humane with bats. They also talked about how do you dispose of your guano, for example. It would mention that the guano, because guano can contain the fungal material that causes white nose syndrome, they suggested do not disperse it farther than the watershed that you found it in. Now, those of you who are deer hunters who deal with CWD, you will hear something similar to that. That is, you don't transport the guts of that deer somewhere else, right? So, because that might, or the carcass somewhere else, because that can cause the CWD to be transported somewhere else, unless you're probably doing a deep burial so that other animals that scavengers can't interact with it. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to get from it. So this I found rather helpful and informative. And of course, there's a host of other things. They talked about how bat houses worked, which ones had a better chance of working, why they can fail, how to use them, and how to make the best chances of the bat house working. And they also had supporting materials that you can download later. One of the things I thought was interesting was the exercise on bat identification. So one of the documents you're able to get is the second edition of a dichotomous key for British Columbia bats. And they had an exercise related to that. And so, again, is this something that would typically going to put money in your pocket? Probably not. However, again, as professionals, the more you understand about bat biology, the better you're going to be able to answer questions from your client and to be a true leader. And as greater concern is occurring over whether certain bat species should be considered threatened or endangered, bat identification is going to become more important as bat populations continue to be under pressure. So this is something where bat identification is going to come to the fore. So the exercise and the information on how to identify bats was quite helpful because it helped you see what the diagnostic clues were that you should be looking for to identify bats. So very helpful. Now, what are some of the criticisms I have of the training? One, the quizzes at the end of each section at times were a bit irritating. So it required you to have 100% pass rate. Now, it allows you to just go back and start over again, but it was a bit irritating at times when you're like, okay, why do I have to go back and just re-answer the same questions over and over again? That was a little annoying. The other thing was a lot of the questions would ask for check all the correct answers. And I think it would have been easier in some ways to have a correct answer rather than having to do multiple check boxes for a particular answer. It just was a little annoying over times. The third criticism I would have of the answer key, of the quizzes, I should say, is that sometimes you were being asked questions that wasn't immediately relevant to the module that you just took. So I'm not exactly sure why that occurred. I do think there was a desire on the creators of the program to review information that may have occurred earlier. And in one case, it almost looked to me like a question was asked that was being taught in the next module. But I could be wrong on that. I went through the material relatively quickly. But nevertheless, that I found was the biggest negative. The second negative, of course, was the information about Canadian law, of course, isn't really relevant to those of us in the United States. So it was a bit tedious. It would have been nice if they had a way for non-Canadian practitioners to skip that module, because it was really not necessary, but you can't. You just got to go through it. It may make you grateful for American law, which is kind of unusual, but it would have been nice to have been able to skip that. Then the last area was sometimes the training course didn't fully, in my opinion, appreciate the need at times for bats needing to be killed for testing. Now, they did talk about rabies, they did talk about histoplasmosis, but as could be expected, I'm not sure they dealt with it as kind of the risks that it possibly could have been. In other words, it's a matter of emphasis rather than being wrong, if that makes sense. So clearly I'm in agreement with them that we are not to be scaring clients and using scare tactics. That is completely wrong. But sometimes we need to be sure that we are properly assessing the risk. And I think, in my opinion, again, I just thought it was a little bit more understated than what it probably should be, particularly when business owners run the risk of liability. Now, to be fair to them, understanding Canada, they have universal health care. So there's never a reason in Canada, for example, that someone would avoid going to the hospital because of money. Now, there are problems with the Canadian health system. This isn't a political show in that regard. I'm not touting the Canadian program as being a great medical program up there, but that's not the point. But that would be their perspective as they're creating this. So sometimes when you have nationalized healthcare, certain issues become less important because there's always going to be treatment available. Where in the U.S., we're a lot more litigious, so lawsuits are definitely a bigger concern. I know I'm a nervous Nelly, so I tend to advise business owners to be on the conservative side just to avoid the lawsuit, because sometimes the process is the punishment when you're dealing with lawsuits. Even if you're in the total right, that can certainly be an issue. One of the things that I thought was helpful with the program, with this training, is it did talk about how to talk to clients, which I thought was a nice touch. I think the training program, how long will it take you to finish? You can probably finish it in a full day. Now, you don't have to finish it in a full day. You can take it in sections. It'll remember where you're at. But unless you're comfortable sitting in a chair for an extended period of time, that can be, you probably want to take it in smaller doses. So you figure if you take two modules a day, then you would finish it in approximately 5 to 6 days, because there's like 11 modules. But the last one isn't that much. You could probably do it in 5 if you did 3 in the last day. So the last few modules will go a little bit faster than some of the middle ones. They can be a little long. So, but nevertheless, the information, I think you'll find it quite useful, quite beneficial. And again, at the present time, it's free. But my request to you would be that if you are going to take advantage of this particular free training, or at no additional cost training because it's being covered by a grant from Canada, take the time to take some notes with it, and do give the creator positive, constructive feedback. Tell them what you like. Tell them what you think it needs to be added to. Be constructive with it. I think they'll really appreciate it, because that's one reason I think they're having it free at this time, is because they're trying to get some feedback from the public. And what better public than you as professional wildlife control operators who can bring a wealth of experience? Because when I spoke with her, that was one area that she wanted feedback on, was from the practitioner side. And so when people ask for our input, folks, it doesn't do any good to complain when you don't like their final product when you did not contribute. So that's not fair when people are asking. I know I've had that challenge with the industry. I've asked for feedback, and it's crickets, right? And then you run the risk that when you finally produce it and publish it, then you get criticized. Then everybody cares, but they didn't have time to care before it got published, right? And so it's easy for people to throw rocks at things. And I'm just saying, I think I give this program probably a B plus, maybe A minus in terms of work. I have to give it a little lower again. If I take out the legal issues that I'm not interested because of Canada, then I would give it an A minus. If I had to include that in, then I would call it a B plus, just because. But again, I'm not in Canada, and I'm not working in a Canadian environment. But nevertheless, I think you'll find it beneficial. And if you have technicians who are looking to get some bat training and have things from a different perspective that incorporates elements of white nose syndrome as well, this is something for them to have a look at. It will certainly improve their understanding on bat handling and some other biological issues related to bats. Well, that's it for me. You've been listening to Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast, where we deal with all things technical related to the wildlife damage management community. Do thank you for watching. Do take a few moments, if you would, to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and also give me some feedback. We'd love to hear from you, whether you can do that into the comment box below, or you can drop me an email at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. Thanks, everybody. Take care. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and/or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and/or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.